ladies and gentlemen. So in this one, I'm just going to do a couple of shots. So yesterday, I set up this bow. This is kind of the final video on this particular bow. Now, I did say at one point I would show it to you again when I had proper arrows for it. Now that I've built the arrows I want, I built the bow accordingly. So I did peel some of this off. In fact, when I got to this point, it shot so nice, I'm not taking any more off. I wanted some on it for damping of vibration. It also has string silencers. This bow is quiet. The shelf has proved to be absolutely rock solid. So is the pin. They're actually quite good. I did say I can hold the bow by it and dangle it and drop it or whatever. I can lean it down on it. I don't have to be super gentle with it. It's actually very, very tough. The knock is glued in place. It's not going anywhere. It is made out of that silk cord I showed you, or maybe didn't, depending on whether I upload the video. In fact, at this point, I think I won't, just because there's not much point. I'll just show it to you now. It's simple. It's actually the core of paracord is in 3 strands in this particular paracord, and so I pulled one of the strands separate. It's like its own little tiny silk rope, and then wrapped it up and then tied it. And I like to sit on top of my knock, so that's how I have it set up. I dialed in my tiller, and this morning got up. After producing a similar group yesterday, I left it overnight. Now, I basically shot it until I couldn't stand it anymore. I actually filmed it, but I'm not going to upload it because it was long and boring, and all I did was test the bow. But a tight group was presented, and it is a nice little bow. Now, what I've done is modified some of these fletchings to make fletchings for this specific shelf. And as you can see, they come in nice and straight, just to give you a quick, and they actually shoot pretty well. So I'm just going to fire a few and shoot a group, and I have modified the fletching, some of them. This is one of them. It's shaved down quite a bit, and just fling a few rounds with it, and you'll see when it actually comes into the target, it's coming in nice and straight. They're not bad. Now, I'm going to fine tune this, just check it. Now, this is the ultimate test of how stable your bow is, really. Now, I shot the crap out of this earlier, and it's actually looking like it hasn't really moved. So I'm just going to shoot some more in there and see if I can produce a nice group. I'll be careful. And shoot. Now, you'll notice it come off pretty hard to the right there. I was actually aiming pretty much right here. These bows, as I pointed out in some other videos, guys, are really incredibly sensitive. You have to be perfect. Your form has to be perfect. And then you get much, much better results. As soon as you start laying in a good form, you're going to start to see yourself hitting the target. And with this particular bow, if you don't have perfect form, you will never hit accurately. This one, in fact, I fired it, and that break actually came from it being struck. I've done that quite a few times where I shoot it, and I know it was fine when I shot it, and then I go to collect it, and it's bloody destroyed. Now, you see how close this comes? I did that to show you hitting these do a lot of damage. If you hit this, you can get close and not damage anything. But if you hit it, you're going to do real damage. And that ends up being the problem, guys. I do not want to be damaging my arrows. And I normally don't shoot very big groups. And when I do, I try to keep the arrow distance a fair distance apart so that as one's coming in, it doesn't hit the other arrow. And I really don't like putting a lot of arrows in a tight group. I usually only do it to tune in a bow in the first place to verify that it is accurate. After that, I really don't. What I'm seeing is it's throwing off rounds to the right. Even this one that came on pretty much where I aimed it came off to the right, which means it's a tiller thing, and that has moved a little now. Yeah, I'm actually seeing it's just a little tiny touch off, but not much. And you really got to check that with any of these bows, as I pointed out. Also, I find you need to shoot pretty hard to get an accurate shot. Now, you heard that, right? That tick. This is what I'm talking about. I'm using a safe arrow to show you guys that, but I really warn anybody against making a bow and tuning it in and using more than one arrow. I highly recommend a bare shaft as well. And you can see this one is consistently off to the right no matter what. It's weird how that works. It's like I shot it earlier, same arrow. It was perfect. But then something happened to it. It got hit by another arrow. This is why I'm showing you guys. This is the one that got smacked. Now, at the same time, right before that, I trimmed these down a little bit because it was kind of being thrown off. And I shallowed these just a little and it came out nicer, more accurate. I don't see anything else wrong with it. But that knock being busted off, I found when that happens, you're better off taking the other side off too. Just because they tend to be bent inwards a little bit and it tends to make it come off the string in an awkward way. Throws it off every time. I had to aim right off to the left to get it to come off roughly in line with the center of the target. So that's one of those things. So I'm going to pull this off and I'll just kind of bend it off and break it away. Okay. Always, I've been firing white fletch in. Suddenly, it's a little more accurate. And the only difference there, it's not jumping off to the right anymore. The only difference there is that I pulled that little piece of knockoff, and you wouldn't think it'd make a difference. Everything, absolutely everything, guys, makes a difference with archery. If I see something not right, I start looking for what happened. And unfortunately, this is part of my problem. My arrows getting hit has caused me so many problems, guys. Because in the end, they're always perfectly accurate as soon as I dial them in. Always. And then something happens. I can't be quite sure what that is. Of course I can. Now see, at this point, my brain says, no, don't do it. Because I got 3 in the target, and I know with a broadhead, guys, just so you can see it. Let me show you that. It is this one a broadhead. Now, I've already got 3 in the target, and I'm about to fire a broadhead at it. And at that point, you want to be pretty damn precise, or you're going to be smucking your other arrows. And I did. Oh, it came out a little bit, this one, but this is not the arrow I just shot. The arrow I just shot is right here, guys. Right in here, and that's what I'm saying. So, you know, you gotta be kind of careful, right? Speaking of careful, I just about knocked a whole bunch of stuff on the table over. And here we go. So I'm just gonna fire my last one now. And as you can see, it's not exactly producing a bad group. Because in the end, I tried to get all my arrows in there. This one came just shy, but again, I don't want to hit this arrow. And it's laid down this way. I almost want to just stuff them through so that they actually represent accurately the exact hole that they created rather than. But this target is at fault there, not the arrows or anything else. They're coming in good and hard, but this is designed to reject them. I have to shoot it really hard to get it in fully and make it stick, like I was saying, even with a decent target point that's been sharpened. Because this target's designed to bounce things. It's not designed to let them pass all the way through. And it has increasing resistance. So I get to a point where I stop wanting to really fire it at the target. My brain always goes, no, don't do it. And it's only for you guys that I ever actually do. Or when I'm testing a bow. Because in the end, in my brain, I want to get closer and closer and closer, but my hand will make me let loose at the right time. It's like a subconscious thing at this point. I've destroyed so many of my arrows. I get to a certain size of group, and my brain's like, no, don't do it. But this is why, guys, because even getting a close shot, I hit an arrow, and it deflected. And I mean, that is the kind of thing I'm talking about. If you're going to practice shoot, try it, especially if you're accurate and you want to shoot accurately. Like that hit right perfectly where I aimed it. So I'm actually going to try and aim it right perfectly there. And if the bow's dialed in, and if the arrows are good, and if I'm good, I ought to be able to make that shot, wouldn't you say? And pulled a little harder, just to try and see it through. And it didn't really happen. But what I heard was to absolutely smack another arrow, guys, and I will bet money it just hit this arrow on its way in, or this one, and got deflected. I will have to watch the video to know which, but in the end, I've had it happen so many times, you guys. I could try, and I know it came off high and to the right there. That's my bad. That was my release, combined with, I think, this particular arrow. I don't like the way that it rolls off of this shelf. And unfortunately, because it's CA glued there isn't too much I can do. I'll try shooting it this way and see if it's better. A little bit better. But that may have hit the dead center. There's a spot there in the middle, as I've said, where it really won't penetrate very well at all. But again, I mean, this target was specifically designed so that they wouldn't go all the way through. And it's pretty good at that. And if I just launch a shot and go, it's pretty accurate. It'll group up nice. So in the end, I mean, none of these are really bad arrows. They shoot pretty well, but some of them are beat to hell. And I mean, they shot better the day after I got them, kind of thing, when I first dialed them in, because they were brand new. And right now, they're so beat up that if I just start taking them and shooting with them, it's like, you know, they're not as good as they used to be. But even still, you know, I'm just going to shoot kind of what, like, an uninterrupted group, I guess you'd call it. And I'm not even really looking where they go. I'm not worried about it. I don't care. I'm just pumping them into the target. If you're that kind of archer, it won't really matter for you. But if you're like me and you actually want to make nice groups, you're going to go through a lot of arrows, guys. And it is one of the points I wanted to make in this series. You may buy arrows and it doesn't. That doesn't mean you should shoot them that way. A lot of people think it does, but I really don't like doing that. I'd rather do something like this, where I make groups of arrows. The biggest group will be a 3 group. Why? Because as soon as I get to 3 arrows in a group, my brain goes, oh, okay, that's dumb. Because I know the odds, if I'm shooting accurately, and this is the whole point. I mean, if I only ever shoot 1 arrow, I'll shoot a lot better than if I shoot 12 in a row, believe it or not. It's like you only have 1 shot, and you know it, so you take more time. Now, you heard that I nicked the other arrow there. This is, even when they're fairly distant, that is possible. And I really don't like that. And it's like, if you really are trying to break in a bow, I like to take my best arrow only and then shoot with that. That is not exactly it. And if that's in the way, it's a frustration. It's annoying. And if you're going to try and make the bow account for the problems of that arrow, that's bad, because none of your good arrows will be accurate because you set up the bow for the bad arrow. Don't ever do that. Set up the bow with your best arrow. And make sure that it's going where you tell it. And that's actually one of my good arrows. When I really want it to, it goes where I tell it. So does that one. They're both pretty good. And it's like, at that point, okay, well, I've got a couple of good arrows in the target. Do I want to hold? Look at them. I mean, they're right next to each other. The holes are so close together, it's not even funny. And I mean, they come out exactly where I aimed them. So clearly, not really a problem. And this is kind of the problem. I mean, I'm a pretty good archer. I could pump those arrows in there all day long. And this is where we come into a significant problem. I will. And if I keep pulling the exact same shot and firing the exact same shot, but again, I've done what I said. I put 2 here. Check this out. Now you tell me if that's not precision. If I'm doing it repeatedly and on purpose. I put 2 together. I put 2 together. I put 1 separate, a little bit apart. Why? Because I don't like to put 3, 1 right on top of each other. It's how you do damage. I'm not trying to hit the middle as much as I am trying to make nice, tight groups, right? So I learned a long time ago that to practice making nice, tight groups doesn't necessarily follow that I should practice hitting the dead center every time. Believe it or not. For one, you destroy your arrows really fast, and you destroy your targets really fast. And if you're doing archery on a budget, folks, some of the best advice I could actually ever give you pertains to protecting your gear, shooting in a way that will not destroy all your gear. Because a Robin Hood might seem cool, and it is, but when you do a Robin Hood, some stuff happens. And if you don't, well, it doesn't. This may not look cool to you, but Robin Hooding that arrow, well, that's technically means damaging the arrow, doesn't it? And there's really not much cool about that from my perspective. I would rather try and make a nice little pattern or a nice group or something. Or just randomly put shots and make sure that each shot goes in a different location so that I don't hit my arrows. You guys see that? On that high weird angle, it didn't even penetrate. These have to get a nice angle into the target in order to really penetrate. Now towards the middle, it's been beat to hell. But when this was brand new, it was really hard to actually penetrate it. I had to give it a full draw on any of my bows. When I hit an area that hasn't been hit before, you can hear that sound it makes as it punctures that outer layer. It's actually pretty tough stuff. So now I'm just going to continue to shoot a few rounds. Now I like to make small groups, don't get me wrong, but I really don't like destroying my arrows, guys. And at this point, I'm going to say I only have a few real arrows left that are kind of like this. And so trying to jam them all into the center of the target doesn't at all excite me. I mean, at all. And in the end, guys, these are the only arrows that I have left from that batch. And I bought a dozen arrows, guys. And I've literally only got 6 left. And then I bought 6 out of the batch before that, and I've got 2. And out of all of these, 1, 2 shattered knock, 3 shattered knock, and 3 without shattered knocks. Which means I've only got 3 of the original knocks surviving in original kind of condition. And even those had fletchings that were damaged. The next set I buy is going to be in a box. And the fletchings have been repaired. They do shoot very well. They are pretty accurate. Those are my 3 best arrows right now, and it's largely because they have their knocks intact and they're not beat to hell yet. Once they've been struck by a few arrows, they are much, much, much degraded, guys. And I do not want to Robin Hood my shit. As I said in the beginning, I have gone through so many arrows, I now only have the 3 good target arrows, essentially. And these 3 are kind of boned because of the damage. Okay? But in the end, even these 3 are good enough because they were weight balanced. They were set up properly. I could rebalance them, but there's really not much point. They're actually still quite accurate arrows if I took them individually. And if I wasn't trying to put every one through the same hole, well, that's not a bad thing. I mean, I'm quite good, and I can put 3 arrows consistently into a target without actually hitting my arrows. And that, to me, is where it's at. I can make a nice tight group where when you go hole to hole, it's less than an inch, but I'm not busting through my other arrows to do it. And that's a really important thing, that protecting your arrows, knowing your abilities. I actually recommend if you're all over the place, you shoot 1 arrow. Because if you don't know precisely where this is going to land, shoot 1 arrow. Until that arrow is dialed in and your bow is dialed in for that arrow, hell no. Dial in the bow properly, like I showed you with your best arrow. Then put that best arrow aside. Then take all your other arrows and start dialing them in individually to the standard of your best arrow. Check its center of gravity, measure it when you find its balance point, and then repeat that exact balance point on all your other arrows. and you'll find they all fly pretty equal. That helps a lot. Then address your fletchings if that's not it. And at the same time, set up your spine. Now this is what I'm talking about. This one particular arrow is pretty much my worst one. It's pretty much all over the place. It's been struck by arrows multiple times. That broke its knock. And if I'm not mistaken, early on it was one of its fletchings as well. And it was okay, right up until the internal of it started to go. This is the second one I found like that, where it's, once I started retesting them all for consistency, 2 of my, what used to be 8 arrows, this is now going to be, of the 6 I do have, this one looks like it should be put aside. Because it's no longer consistent, and I can feel certain rough spots in the shaft of the arrow where it's been hit. And that has affected its spine, guys. Plus it's aged over time. You might think. But in the end, if I pull hard and shoot proper, these are spined for a stronger bow than what this technically is at short draw, but not at full draw. At full draw, they're just about perfect in this bow, which is kind of why I set it up this way. But again, keep safe distance between your rounds. You don't need to make them all perfect. And if you do, you need to go one at a time. And then carefully place each round. And when you're good enough to do that, where you consistently are putting your rounds into the target in a safe way that's not wrecking your arrows, then start trying to make tighter grooves. Aim those arrows. Make sure they're going precisely where you're aiming them. If they're not, there's something wrong one way or the other, guys. And you should be able to consistently put up tight grooves where you actually hit the target. You'll notice most of the time, I hit the target first time right away. And as you get better, you just start making tighter grooves. Now, I've been doing archery a long time, and I do speak from some experience. And if you're going to go much tighter than this, you're going to start causing problems. And so while it's okay to try and put your arrow in between the other 2, you got to look at the angles involved. From a higher distance, it's really tough to see that. And you end up just kind of shooting for the middle all the time. And if your arrows are really good, what ends up happening is you start smucking your other arrows trying to hit the dead center every single time. Which is why I tell you, you need to vary your aim point. The goal isn't to actually make a tight group with every round in the exact same hole. Like that. Did you see that? This is what I'm telling you. I am good enough to knock my arrow every time, pretty much. Maybe not. These aren't the most consistent arrows, but I will do it often enough that I won't have any arrows left after a couple of days of shooting. Because I don't miss. And if I want to hit it, I will hit it. The problem is I don't want to hit it. I just did it to show you guys what the result is. You're way better off shooting off. Who cares if you hit the center? You're learning, you're shooting, you're practicing. Think about it that way. And suddenly it's a different ball game. Now you hear the noise that I just got. Okay, fair enough. I blew out the center of the target. Yippee-ki-yay, man. Okay, cowboy. But I also hit the shaft. And if this had been a broadhead, oh wait, it was, then I could really do some damage to it and to my other arrow. Now you can see I'm starting to lose some of my guts here. This thing has been shot so many times, guys. I'm going to end this video here. These are now technically my worst 3 arrows, but as you can see, that doesn't mean they're not accurate. It doesn't mean I can't shoot with them. The bow is really well dialed in. Obviously, if I can do a demonstration with this like that, it's pretty dialed in. Now the problem is, I kind of wanted to cover a few things about the bow that were problems at one point. I can't do that. None of those are actually problems at this point. It's once it was dialed in and locked in. The wrap around the string with the paracord that's waxed and glued helps hold the tiller, but still can be moved. I can still adjust it finely if I need to, but it's a very fine adjustment, and that's about all it allows me, which is perfect because that's about all it ever needs, because I did it really close to perfect in the first place. The shelf never needed to be adjusted. The nocks never needed to be adjusted. So once I set everything up and glued it all in place, it's locked in perfect. It's permanent. It was when I did it. Now that's the setup. If you can do it that perfectly the first time, well, then go ahead and glue it in place. But I didn't just do it. I checked it. I shot it. I tested it. And when I got it perfect, I stopped right there, verified it, and then glued it in place. Sure enough, it comes out absolutely perfect. And so, I mean, little things got to be accounted for. But this type of longbow has actually proved to be really nice because of the softer handle. Unlike something like this, just show you one I made for my roommate for a second. It's a solid handle. So even though it's a one-piece rod that's down through the center of the bow, much like my other roommate Rick's, you can see here, it's a locked-in block of wood that's thoroughly epoxied, and it runs all the way down. On the other end, there's some bracing to take out shock, and it works really well. It's actually a really nice little bow, very accurate. They all are. I don't make bows that suck, but here's the trick. I have now showed you guys how to make a whole bunch of bows. In this video, I kind of wanted to cover some of the final tips, and really the big one is about arrow longevity. It's one thing to be able to make your arrows. It's another thing to be able to achieve great accuracy. It's a whole nother thing to pay because you wanted to have that accuracy. And a lot of people don't realize that you could have the accuracy without paying if only you divvy up the target in your head. First arrow goes here, second, third, fourth, fifth. Then sixth, if you got one, right in there. And you put two in the middle kind of thing. And the rest, you pick a very precise place on the target in your mind. You aim for that place and you try and hit it. That is a good way to start because it gives you practice. And now you start bringing those arrows tighter together. It's a great way to dial in your bow and make sure it's perfect, believe it or not. It's also a great way to dial in your arrows and make sure they're perfect. And by the time you do that exercise I just showed you, and believe it or not, I know it sounds crazy, but it works like magic. And it means that you don't ruin all your arrows while you're dialing them in. It protects your best arrows, guys. And that's actually really important because I've destroyed so many now that I've gone through a dozen of relatively new arrows that should really have lots of life left in them if it weren't for the fact that I keep smashing them with other arrows. Keith out.